Today is World Suicide Prevention Day. It's a really important day to acknowledge what I feel is a global elephant in the room. I understand why. It's certainly not easy to talk about suicide. It's not easy to consider loved ones that might be having suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies. It's not easy for those of you who are having these thoughts. I'm not someone who shies away from the darkness in the content that I produce and in my spiritual practice. And ultimately, I've had many experiences of wanting to end my life. That is something that I can't just ignore. It's something that inspired Mind That Ego in the beginning. It inspired me to talk out openly because I fully, personally relate to the sense of hopelessness and complete and utter despair, really, that leads people, and myself included, to consider this kind of worst case scenario. I do still get suicidal thoughts now, all right? This is important for me to acknowledge. I still get them, they still surface, and it's something that I'm slowly approaching with more and more awareness and more curiosity, because there's clearly a part of me that is here to learn about this stuff, so I can translate and relate this stuff in different ways. But one thing I've noticed is certainly the perception of time. So if you're feeling suicidal, your perception of time is distorted. It may be that you can't really see a future. It may be that you feel disconnected maybe from your past as well. And I know for me, when I've been in really dark places, it's like the past and future slowly disappear, and then I'm present, but not present in the way that a spiritual practice is aiming to cultivate, or mindfulness is aiming to cultivate. It's more of like a present moment despair. Like, I'm in this box and I'm trapped and I can't find my way out. And it's this feeling of I'm trapped. There's the assumption that how we're feeling in the present moment is not going to change, that you just cannot see a way out. And being aware of this is really important, in that it allows us to just kind of get in survival mode and just say, stay alive. Just stay alive right now. Stay resilient and have faith that this will shift, right? And that is it. And for all the talk and all, you know, all the technique around being present, for all the self-help, positive thinking, you know, all of this stuff, it comes to a point, and I can relate to this, and if you struggle with this, you will understand, it comes to a point where all you can do is stay alive, and all you can do is stay resilient. If we look at Buddhist philosophy, and a game changer for me and my approach to life and my approach to my mental health was understanding that all things are impermanent. All things are impermanent. The mind might create a sense of a fixed state through statements, through beliefs. I'm not going to change. This is always going to be the way it is. I'm never going to feel better. I'm never going to feel happy. Well, I can only talk for myself, but I'm living proof that is not true. And if we mistake these thoughts and these beliefs for truth, that also adds to this feeling of being trapped. Nietzsche talks about the idea of suicide offering some weird form of comfort, and there can be solace. Like if you're just day to day feeling a little bit out of control, chronically depressed, chronically anxious, that there's this feeling of, well, maybe I can take control. This feeling of maybe I can take control through suicide is, again, maladjusted, right? It's not the choice. This idea of choice and control leading to suicide is a fallacy, and it's one of the greatest misunderstandings of the nature of the psyche. What is that misunderstanding? It's that we can associate death with the physical body. and we don't really understand the mechanism, the spiritual function of death and rebirth, right? So if there's an impulse to die, there's an impulse to end things, without this understanding of a spiritual death, there can be a form of confusion around what I must die physically. My life has to end. But actually, from a spiritual perspective and from my experience, in terms of the ego, or the ego's desire of like self-destruction, this is leading to a greater rebirth and a heightening of awareness. I don't know where you're at on your journey. It can seem completely implausible that what you're experiencing is something that leads to growth, but I can assure you it does. Again, if you remain resilient, if you understand the impermanence and the kind of cycles of this stuff, you begin to understand that what you're looking for isn't a physical death, it's a spiritual death. And from that place of surrender, which is absolutely terrifying, you know, it's not it's not like a spiritual death isn't somehow like a cool or an easy thing to go through. It's absolutely terrifying because you know, you feel like you're going to die. You feel like you're going to die. But having this resilience, knowing that this is part of the kind of death rebirth cycle, whilst staying here, staying in this realm, staying alive, is really important, because that will lead you to your ultimate growth. You know, it also has led me to understand that part of the dynamic of suicide is, of course, the relationship to self, but also the relationship to the body. Because the physical body has its own intelligence. The body responds differently to things in life than maybe we do psychologically. But there's a strong interconnection between both. So if we have a relationship where we feel this, you know, this urge towards death, and then we misplace that and we look at the physical body and we say, oh, okay, I want to kill the physical body. This is a real yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy because the body wants to live, the body wants to survive, and this is a vessel of your consciousness that is here to kind of aid your growth. So it's an area that I'm exploring, because I feel it's important to explore. Is like, okay, if you have a suicidal tendency and an urge towards death as a form of escape, right? If there's a chronic, you've got a problem, a chronic experience of depression or anxiety, or maybe just circumstantially something happens where you're like, I don't see a way out, and that is an escape. All of these, looking at a form of death through the physical body, all of these are really unfortunate tragedies, because ultimately these experiences, if we can make this shift towards a psychological, spiritual death, then it becomes an opportunity for growth. Can we, or just to play with this idea, like, what is the potential if we develop self-compassion, not only inwardly in terms of our psyche and our spirit, but if we actually develop compassion towards our bodies? You know, like the rates of, I watched a documentary last night, The Social Dilemma, which is an incredible documentary on Netflix, about the role of social media on society widely, but also in terms of our mental health. And in that documentary, they talk of the rise of suicide and self-harm that coincide with social media. Now, what also coincides with this is issues around body image. And if we live, right, you know, we live in a time and a culture that encourages us to essentially despise our bodies, so that we look to spend our money to improve the way that our bodies look, or to improve the way that we feel. So actually having compassion towards the physical body is something that we're fighting against great forces that want us to not like our body. If you end up hating your body, the chances of then turning angst and this desire for death towards the body is higher. So what if we can improve and cultivate more compassion towards our physical bodies in that? And really the basic understanding of this is, right, like in the past, I've been lucky in the sense that I've never actually attempted suicide. I don't know how, to be honest, but I've never attempted suicide. And self-harm for me has at worst been hitting myself, right? And when this has happened, I've immediately felt like a shame and a guilt, because I felt like, how could I treat my body that way and inflict pain? So there's something there in this relationship with the physical body and building compassion and going against the forces of advertising and the beauty industry that tell us they hate and despise our bodies so that we look to improve, but to actually love and care for the physical body that we embody, that harbours our consciousness, so that we don't want to harm it. If maybe we can start there, then we can look to expand and then have a more grounded approach towards a spiritual, psychological death without wanting to cause harm to the physical body. This also relates to staying alive, right? Because when we have resilience, what we're actually saying is, I'm gonna stay in this body. Resilience against the forces or this fear and this urge, this impulse towards suicide is staying in this body, staying alive. There are many ways that we self-destruct without actively self-harming or actively committing suicide. And that might be like drinking excessively, taking drugs, being reckless in the way that we live our lives. All of these are born from a craving, some kind of craving of annihilation. It's not surprising when you look at the state of the world right now, the constant influx of catastrophe and apathy and disillusionment and hate and anger and bigotry and polarization, These are crazy times that we're living in, and these all contribute, and these are contributing to an increase in suicide and an increase in depression. The key with impulsive suicidal tendencies is to explore trauma, right? To explore trauma and to heal from trauma and to learn again how to relate to our emotions and the body. I started recording this without a script. I just wanted to put something together, but it's evident that there's a lot around this relationship with the body and suicide and spiritual death and rebirth. Like I'm gonna look into this, and I'll come back with some fully formed ideas. But this is really important. This is really important. Exploring the relationship we have with our bodies and spiritual death. But trauma remains in the body. Trauma remains in the body, and if it is not healed, it will stay there. There's a book that I've had recommended multiple times that I've started reading, I've not finished. It's called The Body Knows the Score. But a friend of mine who had read it was telling me that part of trauma is this belief or this felt experience of a fixed state. So we return to this felt embodied experience of like, oh God, I'm feeling like anger or despair. I feel it, it's in my body. It's a very physical and energetic experience, This isn't gonna change. Boom, then we're back to being trapped. And we're back to short-circuiting to suicide as a tendency. The key takeaway is to understand that perception in the moment can really muddy our view of the future, and that there is, as much as being present is important, and it is important, right? It's important to be present to what you're feeling and to learn to not be afraid. To not be afraid of suicidal thoughts, to not be afraid of when those urges come. that fear can lead to shame and guilt. There's nothing to be ashamed of, there's nothing to feel guilty around, you know? Because these, again, shame and guilt will prevent you from speaking to people, and if you don't speak to people, then you're gonna take these things on even more yourself, and spiral, 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 okay? So, looking at the ability to just stay present to things whilst also understanding things will change, and slightly altering your sense of the future. These are all really important, as well as improving the relationship with the body and not mistaking spiritual psychological death as an actual means of growing, right? I believe it was Rumi that said, you know, in the power of dying before you die. To die before you die is a spiritual practice, and it is terrifying. But if we don't have that spiritual framework, then again, we short circuit, and we can short circuit to wanting to end the physical body. You know, for me, these thoughts, you know, suicidal thoughts, suicidal impulses, they've all led me to where I am today in their own weird little way. You know, they've actually given me a lot of courage and resilience. And if you're watching this and you also experience the same, know that you're courageous. Know that it takes a lot of strength to withstand the intensity of these experiences. So you're actually developing strength in just having those experiences. The experience of suicidal thoughts and suicidal tendencies is a strength building exercise. What I would encourage is to reach out. Just reach out. You can reach out and message me, right? So I encourage you to message me, but more importantly, reach out to family and friends, talk to a therapist. I've got my first therapy session in a while later today. I felt it was important to, for various reasons that I've covered in previous videos, just to get a little bit of extra support. I'm actually feeling better in myself generally, but I still think there's a lot to benefit from having that outlet. You do the same, like look for support if you're not already. Talk as openly as you can. Work on, and this is what is another game changer, is like working on developing awareness through meditation, through mindfulness, so you can witness. You're not getting completely caught up and entangled in suicidal thoughts or the emotions that come with it, the pain body, you know, this kind of sense of turmoil, but you can just take a bit of a step back and view the experience as an observer. And if you can do that, it makes resilience much easier, and it makes the bigger picture much easier. You can go like, even if it's a fleeting moment, like sometimes when I'm really drawn in to my emotions, I'll just like be there with it, lose myself in it, and then, like, you know, I think this is a weird metaphor, but sometimes, okay, if you've got a cold and your nose is really blocked and you can't breathe through your nose, have you ever experienced it where all of a sudden your nostrils just seem to just open? Okay. What the hell? I can breathe again. That's weird. Like, and it's such a nice feeling, you know. My nostril just decided to open, and now I can breathe through my nose. Well, as weird a metaphor as it is, this is the same with awareness. My level of awareness, if I'm caught, suddenly it's like the nostril of awareness opens, and oh, I'm now observing the situation, and that is liberation right there. That's breaking the cycle of these depressive, suicidal tendencies. I hope there's value in this video. I hope there's value. I just wanted to put a few thoughts together. Today is an important day to acknowledge, you know, a pandemic in its own right, which is depression and suicide, as well as just mental health crises generally. I do hope that we develop a deeper understanding of this, and I hope that it's through a more embodied spiritual framework where we understand this kind of craving for annihilation is actually a craving for growth, that we understand that there are things to be tended to, there's trauma to be tended to, there is deep inner work to be confronted through these experiences, and the answer is never, ever to end your life. And I want to end this conversation there by just reiterating that there are so many options available. There are so many potential timelines, and you never ever know where you're going to end up. And where you end up can be the most beautiful, beautiful experiences in this life, in this lived experience. As the person that you are today, the beautiful, unique person that you are today is going to have many, many incredible experiences that right now you just have no idea are waiting for you beyond the shadow, beyond the darkness, beyond the blindness that depression can present. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I hope that there's been some value in what I share. Look after yourself, be kind, and develop self-compassion for both yourself, your psyche, your spirit, and your body. And if that all seems a little bit much, then just for now, for today, stay alive.